So as you guys can see, I've moved out of uni now. There's still a lot of unpacking to do, still a lot of tidying up to do, but nonetheless I wanted to make a video. So let's get into that. So I won't lie to you guys, I am a bit confused if I'm meant to be feeling happy or crushed, and honestly I'm a bit of both. I mean, on the one hand, you have the unprecedented performance from Corbyn humiliating the Tories, but on the other, you have the Tories still in, but now in a coalition with right-wing death squads. What I will say though is that this election has definitely vindicated Marxists to some degree. What's been shown is that people are willing to accept policies that stray from the centre, and that what's considered left-wing ideas in mainstream politics today are in no means unelectable, but instead the very thing that broke the Tories' majority to begin with. I mean, there will be some people who say, oh, but it's only because the Tories were that terrible, but exactly, they're so terrible, but the only way to kind of defeat that is giving a real alternative, instead of doing what Blairites want to do and just being very slightly less terrible. And you know, people at the IMT have been saying all year that when you give people a real alternative, you know, they really get engaged in politics, they really get behind it, and that if Corbyn was actually providing a genuine alternative to capitalism, that people would just be ecstatic. And honestly, I kind of just almost subconsciously, you know, wrote this off as rhetoric in my head. But after seeing this election, I think these ideas definitely hold some truth. I mean, you could say that if you did go literal socialist and speak out against capitalism, the media would tear him apart, but how much more can they actually do than what they're already doing? I mean, they'll just make the exact same claims about him being a Marxist that wants to destroy capitalism. They just might be a bit more accurate then. I mean, they've already put all the effort they can into trying to destroy him, and it hasn't worked as well as they hoped. Maybe this election could be cause for Corbyn to go even further left and push the overtone window in mainstream politics further left as well, which would be the very first step in any kind of left-wing organisation happening in Britain, which honestly I'm excited to see. Whether or not Corbyn will take this route, I don't know, but I think it would be a good idea. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you may be aware that on election night I stayed up into, well, going on more late hours of the morning, you know, shitposting about the election. And that was a lot of fun. I was watching the Channel 4 alternative election coverage, and there was one woman on there at one point which was showing some ideas which kind of prompted me to make a video on this topic.
In this respect, it seems we were all totally wrong, and the country has responded incredibly positively to it.
I would say by definition, as someone who believes in democracy, that the country, the voters always get it right by definition.
Now the claim was that the people's choice in a democratic election is by definition the right one to go with, and honestly this annoyed me a bit. And don't get me wrong, I'm not about to go full tanky on you guys, but this is actually something Zizek talks about, how it's quite dangerous to fetishize democracy in this way, which is something liberals often do. He points to Nazi-occupied France and says that people actually democratically supported the Nazi puppet in power there at the time. But would this have been the right option by definition to go with? Of course not. We shouldn't have just taken this as, well, that's a democratic opinion, I guess fascism. No. People don't always make the right choice, and just because they sometimes make these choices through democratic means does not mean they hold any sacredness. And of course this doesn't mean we should just overturn democracy when we don't like it, or that we shouldn't use democracy at all, because of course the alternative to democracy is a dictatorship, and even though people are idiots, I still prefer democracy to just one guy or a group of guys making decisions at will. The only times bypassing democracy could even be considered an option is when fascists are knocking down the doors and aren't going to wait for you to count up the votes on how to deal with them. What this then got me thinking about is, if democracy isn't always right, but it's still our best option, how do we then go about improving it? We remove what Chomsky calls manufactured consent, media propaganda basically. Media plays one of the biggest roles in elections, and as we've seen in this one, had a vested interest to destroy Corbyn at all costs, with actual studies being done to show that he is vastly misrepresented the majority of the time. The thing is though, everyone engaged in politics already knows why this is. Corbyn's left wing, he wants to raise corporation tax, and he wants to end the collusion between the Tories and corporations, and people like Rupert Murdoch in particular. And of course, as every media outlet is owned by a corporation, this goes directly against their interests. You see, whether left or right-wing media, everyone knows that their actions are always driven by profit, and that's always one of the main accusations from either side against the other. But what everyone then doesn't go and ask is, how can we fix this? People just assume that's the way life is and how it always will be. People just assume that's the way life is and how it always will be, and that you can either try and make your own media outlet, which of course won't outcompete any other media outlet unless you also take corporate funding, which then you just turn into the beast that you were trying to fight in the first place, or you just try and dispel online and in real life any lies told against your side in the media, and just hope that people don't fall for it. What no one ever considers is radically restructuring the media so that this just isn't a problem anymore. And I'm not even talking about something that can only be attainable in some kind of socialist utopia. Now, the media acts in the interests of the capitalists because it's all owned by the capitalists. So, what if the media was owned and run by the workers? Surely, it would act in the interests of the workers. If we turn all media outlets into cooperatives, even under our current system, and retain markets, this would go miles to ending many of the problems that we have with media today. There'd be no CEO who also invests in oil telling us that global warming isn't real, for example. Of course, if this is still done under capitalism, I'm well aware that there would still be profit incentives to make flashy titles, to catch people's attention, or to cut corners in research to get as much stories out as possible in a shortest amount of time. That's why I would propose that we go ahead and abolish markets as well, but I also get that's a bit more unrealistic right now. But the main point is that there isn't any kind of overarching agenda anymore, and that the only interest involved is the interest of this media outlet itself, rather than being linked to a bunch of other industries and corporations because of the people who run the media outlet. They'd actually be reporting in a way that the cooperative actually believe will improve people's lives instead of improving corporations' profits. What do you want? See if you want to stay on my lap, or if you're just gonna get off and annoy me. Now, some of you may be thinking that in this proposed alternative, all media outlets are going to be run by left-wing hippies who only report with a far-left agenda, because that's the type of people who run cooperatives today. I have 2 points on this though. Firstly, there's a reason that cooperatives today are only really run by left-wing people. I mean, cooperatives in general just aren't seen as a valid alternative for most people, apart from people who are already familiar with the left-wing ideas. Bad Mouse Productions actually has a whole video going over this kind of stuff, so I'd really recommend watching it. Secondly though, it's not even actually true that only left-wing people form cooperatives. What's more accurate is to say that only left-wing people knowingly form cooperatives. Oh, what are you doing? Huh? Where are you going? Oh. Okay. Now, to explain what I'm talking about here, I'm just going to show this clip from Richard D. Wolff, an American economist.
For the last 30 years, in a place called Silicon Valley, the area below San Francisco running to San Jose in that part of California, between the bay and the ocean, is a center, as many of you know, for the telecommunications and computer industries. Every year there, hundreds of engineers quit their jobs. They work with places like Cisco and IBM, Apple, and all those kinds of big corporations. They quit. And here's what they say. I hate my job. I hate going there in my tie and my jacket and my formal outfit. I hate being told by some asshole executive what I'm supposed to do. I'm not productive. I can't explore. I hate my job. I go there because I get a lot of money, but I hate my job. These people in large numbers quit every year. And here's what they do. They walk away and they collect with a few of their friends, 20, 30, 40, their little laptops, and they go to somebody's garage who has a garage, and they line up their laptops, and here's what they say. We're going to come to work in whatever we feel like. Hawaiian shirts and Bermuda shorts. We're going to come with our Frisbees and our toddler and our dog. We're going to come in various states of, how should I put this, highness. And we're going to have a wonderful time. And we're going to enjoy what we do. And we're going to love to come to work. And guess what? The statistics show they are more productive than the counterparts who stayed behind in the top-down hierarchical capitalist enterprises. And they say so themselves. We are more productive. We are freer here. You know what these people have done? They've walked away from capitalism. They've walked away from a capitalist enterprise, and they've created a non-capitalist enterprise, an enterprise run by the workers themselves. They have strict rules. We're all equal here. No boss, no underling. We work 4 days a week. That's where I got the example I gave you earlier. And on the 5th day, we get together and make all the decisions. We love our jobs. Here's the irony. When I go and speak to them, and they've asked me to come, and I explain all of this to them in the larger frame, and I end up looking across the podium and saying, you know, there is a person who kind of came up with this idea in a very interesting way a while back. You may be surprised to know who he is. Oh, who is he? Who is he? And I say, oh, Karl Marx. And they look at me with shock, and that's when I learned that most of these people who do this are Republicans. They are. And they think of what they're doing as showing entrepreneurial initiative. And I remember the first time I heard that saying, look, it's fine with me. You want to call it a purple banana? I don't care. But this is what you're doing. You're changing the economic system. Those are very successful companies. So this is not a foreign phenomena. This is not something Americans don't take to. Conservative Americans take to it. And again, history helps us here. Did the people who broke away from feudalism, who were serfs, who ran away into the woods, when they set up employer-employee relationships, did they say, hey, we're starting capitalism? They had no idea of such a word. They were making do in a new way that made sense to them, that they preferred to the feudalism that they had before. Later on, it got the name. Those people in California, they walk away from capitalism, but they need someone like me to come and say, hey, that's what you just did. It's doable. It's now a question of whether we make it happen or not.
So as you can see, cooperatives are for people with both left and right-wing views. So likewise, you'd have both left and right-wing media outlets still. The best part about this though is that if it's true that Corbyn has cause to go further left-wing, then, in my eyes at least, it's in the realm of possibilities for this to happen, or at least be attempted. Like I said, everyone already knows the media outlets are complete bullshit, so it's just taking that step to say, hey, let's do something about it. The only hard part, of course, would be doing this through legal means, because we must remember that Corbyn is still a reformist, and I can't really see him forcibly appropriating the Daily Mail's printing press for the good of the people as much as I'd love him to. We have to remember that while not officially part of the state, the media outlets are still very much part of that capitalist-controlled state apparatus used to retain their power. And if it comes under threat, they'll do everything they can to save it. The thing is though, as we're seeing right now and in the US as well, that existing establishment and existing state apparatus just doesn't seem to have the same touch as it used to. I mean, imagine how much better Corbyn would have done if he wasn't mercifully being destroyed by the media every day, defaming him at every corner. Putting the media in the hands of the workers themselves, who actually enjoy what they do instead of just being paid to tell lies, would drastically improve the state of democracy in our society. But anyway, thanks for watching.